God, you are so worthy. Today we're here on Everybody's Sunday, not to bring in anyone else glory, but to bring you glory. And we are so thankful for what you've done for us. God, we thank you that we can gather today in a free country and worship the one true King. We are so thankful. We're thankful for the body and the family of God. And we just give you this day in your name. Amen. You may be seated. Over the last few weeks, we have been giving some hints about today. But it was brought to you by the letter M. The number 6 was thrown around, and there was some hints towards ice cream. And don't worry, you'll get ice cream. And there was 6 for 6, and there was a whole bunch of hints. You can go online and watch the videos. But this morning we're going to be doing something that's going to be very interesting, okay? And so it's gonna be some fun. And so every year I kind of plan out some series and some things that I want to talk about. And I had this idea for a series probably about 3 years ago. And this series is called When Pigs Fly. Anyone ever heard that saying? Oh, I'll believe that when pigs fly. It's like, that's never going to happen. And I'll believe that when pigs fly. And every year I kind of, it was never felt like it was the right time. I kept pushing the series and pushing the series. So as we were talking about Everybody's Sunday, we thought, how fun would it be to do an entire sermon series in one Sunday? And you're like, that doesn't sound that fun. But a whole sermon series in one Sunday. So this morning what we're going to do is we're going to have 6 people share for 6 minutes each on When Pigs Fly. And everyone's picked a miracle from the book of Mark. And so, I'm not going to tell you who the people are. You'll know when they get up here. But here's the catch. So Junior's right here. He has a squirt gun. And they only have 6 minutes. There's a countdown on the screen. There's a countdown at the back. And at 6 minutes, Junior, and where's the other water gun? Oh, you grab it. Bring it over here. Milen's going to do it. So Milen, come sit right here. You got to bring the bucket of water too. You got to listen very closely. When it goes to 6 minutes, when the time is up, you need to squirt who's ever speaking. Okay? Even if it's me. Now here's the catch. You squirt them once, and then they've got 30 seconds to wrap it up. If they're not wrapped up in 30 seconds, you just keep squirting until they leave. Okay? No pressure. When Pigs Fly. The book of Mark. Do you remember X marks the spot? Do you remember the hint? You say, why are we doing this? I think more than ever, in the time of history where we are, more than ever, we need to remember that God still does miracles. That Jesus is still with us. And He is a God of miracles. Every single day there's miracles all around us. So there's going to be 6 people straight in a row for 6 minutes. And did you load your gun? You got to load it up. Okay? Test it on Marielle. No, just kidding. Alright? So we're going to go 6 minutes. And their topic is going to be on the screen, as well as... Oh, when they come up, they need to ring the buzzer to start, and they got to ring the buzzer to end before their 6 minutes is up, or they're going to get sprayed. I'm going to tell you, I'm hoping at least 3 people get sprayed. All right? So,
okay, so my time doesn't start until I hit the buzzer. All right, I'm totally going to get sprayed. All right. so I chose the miracle of the leper because the story holds a place that's near and dear to my heart. I heard a sermon on it years ago as a teenager, and it forever changed my life. So let's read Mark 1:40-42. A man with leprosy came and knelt in front of Jesus, begging to be healed. "If you are willing, you can heal me and make me clean," he said. Moved with compassion, Jesus reached out and touched him. "I am willing," he said, "be clean." Instantly, the leprosy disappeared and the man was healed. Now, immediately, I wanted to go to the approach with the untouchables and how society has deemed certain people unworthy and they've cast them out, and how we need to be like Jesus and show compassion and go out and minister to those people. Because that sermon years ago that I heard, that's when I felt the call of God into ministry. So it's always had a special place in my heart. But as much as I love that viewpoint, I couldn't shake another thought, and that thought is that there's a huge parallel between leprosy and sin. And the phrase, "we are the leper," kept coming to mind. So I have 3 quick points that I'm going to share with you this morning. Number 1, leprosy and sin may start inward, but it always comes to the surface. Leprosy was known for all of its outward signs, but the real problem began within. It was a nervous system disease, and it began to attack from the inside out. Sin is exactly the same. The root of sin runs deep, and it begins with a sinful heart. Just like a leper would have the disease long before it would begin to show, sin does the same thing, and it takes root. Long before anyone knows what's going on, it's taken root in our heart, and it begins with a sinful heart before anyone even sees what's going on. At first, the leper will start feeling numb because it's attacking their nervous system. It makes things a little numb, makes things a little uncomfortable, and then they begin to get red patches that start to show. But it's no big deal because they can hide those patches, they can cover them up. There's no need to go to the priest and to uncover what's really going on. Sin does the exact same thing. It's okay that I hate my coworker. It's okay that I talk bad about them in my head, not out loud. They'll never know. It's no big deal. My husband, my spouse, my wife, they drive me crazy. But you know who's really nice? That person in the 3rd row at church. They're sweet. They're good looking. They would make a great spouse. No one's gonna know. It's no big deal if I look at some porn. It's in private. There's no way anyone's ever gonna find out. It's no big deal. And before anyone knows, we have this sin that's beginning to fester inside of us. And no one really knows what's going on. But as time passes with the leper, they no longer can hide the patches that are taking over their body. They can't hide that their face is becoming scaly and lumpy and lion-like. They can't hide that their hair is turning white. And they can't hide that their voice is becoming more and more hoarse. And just like a leper's hoarse voice, deep voice, scratchy voice, sin will be heard. Sin will always creep to the surface until it's fully exposed. Addiction will always come to the surface. Hatred and bitterness, they'll always come to the surface. Adultery will come to the surface. Point number 2. Leprosy, like sin, separates. Lepers were required to live outside the camp. They were banished to the deserted places, to the outskirts of town where nobody lived. Or they could go to a colony where other lepers lived. Their disease completely isolated them from their friends and family, but it also isolated them from God. Because they couldn't live among their friends and family, and they couldn't go into town freely, that meant they also couldn't worship at the temple. And just like the leper, sin separates us from our loved ones and from God. We want to hide our sin, so we begin to keep to ourselves. We begin telling lies so that we can hide our secrets. We begin hanging out with people that are like us, or they sin like us. And we begin to seclude ourselves. We begin to stop doing the things of God. We stop going to church. We stop reading the Word. We stop listening and obeying His voice. Sin separates us from God. Point number 3. Only Jesus can heal the leper, and only Jesus can heal the sinner. There was no remedy for leprosy in the biblical times. Unless you were miraculously healed through Christ, you died with the disease alone and isolated. There's also no remedy for sin except for Christ. Without a miraculous healing, we are all going to die in our sin, spiritually isolated and alone. But the miracle in this story it can also be the miracle for us. Like the leper, we too can come to the feet of Christ and cry out for a cleansing miracle. It's not done yet. And I'm sure there was people that were watching that thought, pigs will fly before someone touches that leper. And I'm sure there was people in your life that thought the same thing, that pigs will fly before you get saved. But Jesus saved the leper from the most dreaded disease, the most hopeless situation, and just like that, Jesus can also save you from what you view as the most hopeless situation. So today, may we learn from the leper, may we come to Jesus when we are in a sinful situation, because just like in Mark, Jesus still does miracles today.
The mic is wet, so you guys know. Hey everyone. So I'm just getting set up. Are you guys ready? So, hello everyone, my name is Annie Lynn. If you didn't know, I'm an intern here this summer. I'm a Bible college student. It's great, it's awesome. You've probably not seen me here before very often, but that's okay. So, the subtitle of my sermon today is Faith versus Fear. And so we're going to talk about a miracle that's happening. I'm talking really fast, I'm under pressure. So we're going to talk about a miracle that happens in Mark in chapter 4, verse 35 to 41. And I'm going to read it really quickly, and it's about Jesus calming the storm. And so it says, "That day when evening came, he said to his disciples, 'Let's go over to the other side.' Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along, just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, 'Teacher, don't you care if we drown?' He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, 'Quiet, be still.' Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, 'Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?' They were terrified and asked each other, 'Who is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him.'" So, on a boat, storm, scared, fear, Jesus sleeping. Clear? Makes sense? So, imagine being a disciple of Jesus in that moment and being in this situation where you've seen this guy like perform miracles, you've seen him doing things that no one else has, and then you need him because you're in a storm, and he's sleeping. They're fearing for their lives, and their only hope in this situation is sleeping on a cushion. Just like taking a nap, minding his own business. Here's the thing. The fear that was in these disciples was, let's be real, pretty rational. A lot of these people were fishermen, so they knew these waters. Some of you may not know, but the Sea of Galilee is like 696 feet under sea level. So it's like super, super prone to just like random storms. And these fishermen knew that because it was a part of their jobs. And the kind of boat that they had was like really small and narrow, so it was like prone to over flooding. And so they were flooding in that moment. They're probably taking these like buckets and trying to scoop out this water, and they're like, "Hello, Jesus, like we're gonna die, like this is going to happen." And so in that moment, they decided to let their fear of dying become greater than their fear in the legitimate presence of Jesus. And like he was right there. Like Jesus was right there. And they let this fear just overcome them. and they did not let their faith in Jesus be the driving point. And so in their fear, they approached Jesus. And they were like, Jesus, don't you care if we drown? Like, do you hate us? Like, are you okay with us dying? Don't you love us? And they went straight into wrongfully accusing Jesus. They went about it with anger. And here's a little point that I think is probably applicable to a lot of us. When you have fear as your main drive in these types of situations, not legitimate like storms, but like figurative storms in your life, you are no longer rational. You become angry, and you convince yourself that Jesus doesn't care about you. And that probably has happened in your life. You're like, God, where are you? This is happening in my life, and like, I don't know what to do. And I'm so confused. You're not there. It's because we let fear become our drive. And we convince ourselves that God has forsaken us. But that's nowhere near the truth, guys. And let me tell you what the truth is. It's that Jesus wasn't sleeping because he was just tired. He wasn't sleeping because he didn't care whether or not everyone would die. I'm tired, guys. Jesus was sleeping because he had full faith, knowing that his Almighty Father was in control. Yeah. Amen. Like that. So he knew that God was calling him to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, and he knew that God was going to take him there. And so then, in his faith, he got up at the right time. And he was like, quiet, be still. And then the storm was calm because he let faith be the driving point of that situation. And then after that miracle, the disciples were like still scared. And like, wouldn't you think that this would end with like rejoicing? Everyone's like, oh my gosh, God, you're so good. That's so cool. No, because this was a pivotal moment that revealed to them that Jesus is the Son of God. Because it says a lot of times in the Old Testament that only God can still these waves. So it was like this moment of realization, like, this guy is the real deal. And so this shows us that in tough situations, you can become closest to the Father, and you can be taught more about Jesus. I still have 30 seconds. If you allow it. So in these hard times, it can be a teaching situation. Junior, so confused. So, okay, 16 seconds. If there's one thing that you can take from this miracle that's performed in Mark, I want you to know that be still, let your faith overcome your fear, because Jesus is here. It rhymes. So, in that situation where you feel like you can't get a break, I'm not ending. It's my favorite part. I want you guys to do these amen things again, okay? Okay, so in that situation when you feel like you can't get a break, have faith because Jesus is here. In your battle with mental illness, have faith because Jesus is here. In your battle with physical illness, have faith because Jesus is here. In your financial struggles, in your addictions, have faith because Jesus is here. In every storm you are going through, you will go through life and have faith because Jesus is here. And that's another miracle.
Jesus didn't wear sandals. Well, he didn't wear nice shoes, so I'm not going to wear any shoes. And are you guys having fun so far? Yeah. Junior, if I go 30 seconds longer than 6 minutes, just give her. Like, just shower 2.0, okay? I have to pee. If I talk too quick, there's grace, okay? Ready? Oh my word. It's set. Go. Okay, so this morning I'm speaking out of Mark 5. Mark 5 verses 21 to 43, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to take you through the timeline. We're going to go on a journey. Sound good? Yeah. Okay, so Jesus had just gotten off a boat. All of a sudden, there's a huge crowd around him. Then, a synagogue leader by the name of Jairus came up to Jesus, fell right on his knees, and he said, "My little daughter is dying. Please come put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." Imagine. Jesus begins to walk with Jairus towards his house, and while they were walking, the huge crowd followed and began to press in. I'm claustrophobic. I wouldn't do very well. Not at all. So, in the crowd, there was a woman that was subject to bleeding for 12 years. Everybody say 12 years? 12 years. Not fun. So, she had suffered for many years, seen many doctors, spent all her money, didn't get better. She got Works. Dear Jesus, take the wheel. Doing well. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and she touched his clothes because she thought, if only I touch his clothes, I will be made well. All of a sudden, immediately the Bible says, her bleeding stopped and she was healed from her suffering. Praise Jesus. Jesus realized all of a sudden that power had gone out of him. Whoa. And he stops in the crowd on his way to see the little girl and he says, who has touched me? The disciples are freaking out. They're like, Jesus, there's a crowd. Why are you asking who touched you? We're never going to find out. But the woman came up, fell at his knees, and he told him the whole truth. Jesus said to the woman, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. While Jesus was still speaking to the woman, someone came from the house of Jairus and said, your daughter is dead. Why are you bothering the teacher any longer? Jesus heard what he said and he told the father of the young girl, don't be afraid, just believe. Those are powerful words. Jesus left the crowd, letting only Peter, James, and John follow him. That's 3 disciples. Everybody say 3? 3. And the Father, of course, because gotta keep him in the loop. So they got to the house. There's tons of commotion. Tons of people screaming, crying. This 12-year-old daughter just died. I can't imagine. Jesus says to them, what is all the commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but she's asleep. The people laugh at him. That's not very nice, kind of embarrassing. But Jesus proceeds. He takes the parents of the girl and the 3 disciples, and they go into the house where she was. This is the best part. He took the little girl by the hand, and he said, Talitha kum, which means, little girl, I say to you, get up. Everyone was left astonished because she walked up and she was walking. Jesus gave the parents strict orders not to tell anyone as well as the disciples, and then he told the parents to give her something to eat. Who agrees that there's nothing better than just a good old snack after a hard day? Amen. So, we're doing so good! Does that make sense? Yes. Okay, so here are a couple things that stand out to me personally in the story. It's a fave. I love this one. First of all, both of the people that were healed and cared for in this story were women. All the women say amen? Amen. Jesus knew how to love women well, and he was continually advancing women throughout the Bible. That's why I can be here and do what I'm doing today. Amen. Love our women in ministry. Both of the miracles here involved a number, and the number was 12. Everybody say 12. 12. There's a big difference between this number for both situations. The difference is that the woman that was suffering for 12 long years in her sickness, but the daughter had only lived for 12 short years. See the contrast? It's pretty interesting. I can't imagine how the woman that had been suffering for 12 years would have felt. She must have been thinking, man, I'll get healed when pigs fly. I spent all my money, there's no help in me. The woman was healed in an instant after years of being unseen, unknown, and alone in her sickness. She stepped out in faith and boldness in pursuit of the one that she knew could heal her. She pushed her way through the crowd and to find the Jesus that she had heard about. Isn't that amazing? My favorite part. Her story for me paints a beautiful picture of what unapologetic pursuit of our God looks like. Some people might just say that Jesus was kind of careless. He stopped in the crowd when he could have just realized that the power went out of him and just left. But he stopped and took the time, and meanwhile, the little girl died. He performed an amazing miracle on the way to see this little girl in front of such a huge crowd. And just imagine, if something like that were to happen right now, we would all be able to leave here today testifying of the power and love of Jesus. So that whole crowd had quite a story to tell. But this isn't the case for the healing of the little girl. Jesus was in pursuit of a more private setting, and even though he had just taken the time to heal the woman of a crazy long disease, he wasn't being neglectful of the little girl at all. After all, what's more powerful than raising someone from the dead? Sometimes Jesus just wants to be in a more intimate setting with you to truly reveal his love to you. He wants to be in relationship with you. He wants to get alone with you today. He said to the parents and the disciples not to tell anybody what had happened. Sometimes things are just better kept private. Sometimes Jesus shows up in amazing ways, leaves everybody amazed, and everybody has seen what he's done, but in other times he works in the quiet, the private, and the alone moments in our lives. If you're here this morning and you feel like a part of you is dead, that could be your walk with Jesus, your calling, your marriage. I believe that Jesus Christ himself wants to raise that part of you back to life this morning. But first, you need to allow him to get alone with you. You need to spend time in his word. I'm preaching to myself this morning. We need to let him in to work. Keep spraying, I'm not done. We need to let him to get alone with us in the private places, to be in communion with him. And that is another miracle from Mark.
It's all I could remember, really. It's all I knew. I wasn't really sure when it had happened. I mean, I was always a little bit different. I wanted to be like everybody else, but I wasn't. I mean, I dabbled in some dark stuff, and somewhere along the journey it happened. Demons started to live inside of me. I mean, it was torture. It was hell. I lived alone. No one ever came near me. They actually tied me up in chains to keep me safe from myself. The pain became so much that I became to cut myself and to cry out, and no one could help me, but everybody tried. It was a day like no other day. Normal, boring, ordinary. I was alone, I was screaming, I was cutting myself, and then he came across the water. It was so strange. I knew there was something about him, and I had to go to him. As soon as he came to land, I ran up to him. I'm not sure why, but it was like I knew. When I got to him, I threw myself at his feet, and he said to me, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." I yelled, "What do you want with me? Jesus, Son of the Most High, in God's name, don't torture me." See, that's all I knew. People tortured me all the time. They threw rocks at me, and they tied me up. I thought he was going to be like everybody else, but he was like no one else. Then he asked me my name. I didn't even get a chance to answer when out of my stomach came this voice, "I am Legion." I begged him not to send them out, but he knew better because he loved me. There was this herd of pigs nearby, and the demons inside of me begged, "Send us into the pigs. Don't just send us away." And he did that, and the pigs actually ran off of a cliff. Maybe that's where the saying came from. Well, see, that happened when pigs fly. Then someone and everyone started talking about what happened. They witnessed, told people what happened about me and what happened to the pigs. And then people wanted Jesus to leave. It was so strange. He had just done something that no one else could do, and they wanted him to leave. So Jesus starts to leave. I did not want him to go. I wanted him to stay. He had saved my life. He had saved me. He didn't do much for the pigs, but he saved me. I mean, I was so thankful. I ran up to him and I begged him. I said, "Please do not leave." But it was like he still had more things to do. I begged him. I said, "If you won't stay, let me go with you." He said, "No." And then he said the strangest thing to me. Stranger than me cutting myself, stranger than him saying, "Come out." Stranger than the pigs. He said, "No, you stay here and live among your people." It was like what he had done for me, people needed to know about, that he could do it for them. It was like my message was a message of hope that needed to be heard, and my people needed to hear it. It was like he needed me when only 5 minutes ago I needed him more than anything. So that's why I'm here today. What Jesus did for me, he can do for you. If you are with addiction or sin or hurts from the past or unforgiveness and pain and hopelessness. He did the same miracle for me that he wants to do for you today. That he wants to take someone who's tormented, someone who's been living in captivity, and he wants you to be free. It was the craziest day. An ordinary day, just like today. And he changed my life forever. See, this is just one of the miracles from the book of Mark. And what is Jesus trying to say to you, to me today? Let me change you. Let me make a difference in your life. And when you live here, go and live among your people.
Okay, folks, we need to make a long story short, so listen up. Jesus fed thousands of people one day with 5 loaves and 2 fish that a young boy gave him. There were 10,000 people there. The story says 5,000, but actually there was 10,000 people there, and they had a buffet with this small amount of food that this young boy gave. And the amazing thing was there was leftovers. This is a miracle found in Mark, an incredible miracle. And for every miracle that Jesus did, there's something for us to learn. The first thing we're going to look at is this, is to never look at the difficulty of a situation based on what you do or don't have. The disciples had nothing. They had nothing to work with. Andrew, one of the disciples, looked at the number of people to be fed. He looked around and he compared it to the food that the boy brought. And he says, well, this can't be done. There's nothing we can do about this. And Philip, another disciple, began to crunch the numbers, and he said, Jesus, with all of these people here, it's actually, I've crunched the numbers, and it's going to take about 8 months' wages to feed everybody. I'm sure they were thinking something like, all these people will be fed maybe when pigs fly. They were so focused on what they didn't have that they lost focus of what they did have. And I think we do that a lot in life. I think we do it a lot. I'm lacking this. If I have this talent, if I looked this way, if I only had that income. If you get in the mindset, you lose sight of what you do have to offer. And the disciples got caught up in that thinking. They did. Sorry, Jesus, we actually just don't have enough here. We don't have enough. It was all a test. Because it was all a test because Jesus had a plan. And if I was Jesus, I would have been thinking something like, really guys? Because I came to earth about 31 years ago, and I was born of a virgin. I turned water into wine. I cast demons out of people. I healed Jairus' daughter. I raised the widow's son. I calmed the sea. I healed blind people. And you're thinking this is a problem because that's all that you have. Guys, I got this under control. I'd be thinking if I was Jesus, and I'm not even halfway done yet. Philip and Andrew somehow forgot that Jesus was the only thing they needed. You know, we can't make that same mistake. And yet we do. Whatever situation you're in right now, don't just look at it from what you have to offer. Because what you or I have to offer may actually not be enough. May actually not be enough. There are many situations in life that what we have is just not enough. The second thing, Jesus will only transform what is given to him. He doesn't grab things. He doesn't take things from us. This is what we can learn from that young boy, that Jesus will transform what we give him.
This boy appeared to be alone. His parents aren't mentioned. He gave barley bread, which kind of said that he's poor. So he's poor and alone and eating this bread. But children are so amazing. There's no doubt about that. But one thing children aren't inclined to do a lot is to share. But this boy shared what he had. He was unique. I want to be like this kid, willing to offer God what I have, even though the people around me may not think it's much. Don't you want to be like that? I want to be like that. He was kind, he was generous, he was actually radically kind. And there's nothing that's going to convince me that out of these 10,000 people that he was the only one with food. There were people there and they were hiding food. They didn't want to share what they had. The third thing is why did the disciples pick up the leftovers? Because that happens in the story in Mark. Jesus says, go around, don't waste anything, pick up the leftovers. And they went around and they were picking up leftovers, putting in the baskets, picking up leftovers. You see, there's something amazing to be learned from the leftovers. Bread was a gift from God, and it was recognized as that because there's another story in the Bible how God sent manna, bread from heaven, for the Israelites. And bread was such a gift from God that if you dropped it on the floor while you were eating, you had to pick it up and you had to find a reason, a way to use that bread. Why did Jesus ask his disciples to gather the leftovers? Because of this. We're never to waste what God has given us. We are never to waste what God has given us. The leftovers were evidence of God's blessing. They were evidence of God's grace. And I can picture the disciples now picking up this bread going, this is amazing. Look at all this bread left over. And too often we get thinking that God gives more blessing to others. Look inside your basket. Collect every single blessing, every single good thing that God has given you, and account for it. And pick it up and be amazed at what he has done for you. That's it. It's another miracle from Mark.
This is Peter.
Hey-o! Whoop!
Peter was a fisherman who was called by Jesus.
Hey!
Peter saw the many miracles of Jesus,
Whoa!
and he heard all his teachings. Great crowds followed Jesus wherever he went. One day after Jesus had done a great miracle, he sent the disciples in a boat across the lake while he stayed and sent the people home.
See ya! Hey, Jesus!
After sending them home, Jesus went up into the hills by himself to pray. Meanwhile, the disciples were in trouble far away from land, for a strong wind had risen, and they were fighting heavy waves.
Ah!
About 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them, walking on water. When the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified.
Ah!
In their fear, they cried out, "It's a ghost!"
Hold on there.
But Jesus spoke to them at once. "Don't be afraid," he said. "Take courage. I am here." Then Peter called to him, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water." So Jesus said, "Yes, come." So Peter went over the side of the boat
Whoa! You're awesome!
and walked on the water toward Jesus. But when he saw the strong wind and the waves,
Ah! Whoa!
he was terrified and began to sink.
Jesus! Help me!
"Save me, Lord!" he shouted. Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. Jesus said, "You have so little faith. Why did you doubt me?" When they climbed back into the boat, the wind stopped. Then the disciples worshipped him and said, "You really are the Son of God."
Okay, so, 3.5 minutes. Okay, so if you told Peter one day that he would walk on water, I bet you he would say, when pigs
fly. So as you saw, my story is Jesus walking on the water. And we can learn 3 important things from this story. Number 1, when Jesus calls us out to something, we can trust that he will be there with us. So when Peter asked Jesus to let him come onto the water, Jesus never hesitated. He said, all right, come on down. It took a lot of faith on Peter's part to step out on the boat, right? And sometimes we see this story and we think it's so amazing that Jesus walked on water. Well, Jesus is the Son of God. He can do whatever he wanted, right? I think what's amazing is Peter, who's a human, he walked on water, right? Through God's power. And so when Jesus calls us out onto the water, we know that he will be there with us every step of the way. And we just need to trust that he will be with us and that he is in control. And we can trust God to take care of us. Right? Jesus doesn't call us to do difficult things and then leave us there. Right? When a child is learning how to walk, they don't take their first 3 steps. We're like, good to see you when you're 20. Right? We guide them, we hold their hand, we pick them up when they fall. Right? And this is what Jesus does for us. He does the same thing. He guides us. He picks us up when we fall. Point number 2. When we take our eyes off Jesus, that's when we sink. When Peter stepped out on the boat, he was probably thinking, this is awesome. I'm doing it. I'm walking on the water. But then all of a sudden he looks around and he realizes the waves are huge. He realizes, wait a minute, I'm walking on water. I'm going to sink. And then eventually he does start to sink. Right? And this is what happens in our life. When I was 13, we went on like a grade 8 school trip to Montreal. We went to like the Olympic pool. And there's like this super high diving board. And all my friends convinced me to do it. And so I did. And so I jumped off. So I took the left, I took the step of faith. But then as you're falling, you realize this is really high. Right? And so this is what happens to Peter. He steps off the boat and he realizes, wait a minute, this is really high. And so he gets scared and he sinks. And so in our life, when we go through storms, when we go through troubles, we need to remember to keep our eyes on Jesus so that we don't sink. Point number 3. Jesus always helps us when we fall. And so when Peter starts to sink, right, and because of his unbelief, he's like, Jesus, help me. And so Jesus reaches down and he pulls Peter up. He doesn't say, Peter, why did you doubt me? He says it only after he helps him. Right? He doesn't just say, oh, well, that's your bed, you made it, lie in it, right? And so, the world tells us that when we get in trouble, we need to get ourselves out of trouble, right? Have you ever heard God helps those who help themselves, right? Here's the reality is God helps those who can't help themselves, right? And so, Jesus helps Peter, he lifts him out of the water. And so, in our life, we want to remember 3 things. Look at me. Number 1, when Jesus calls us to something, we can trust that he will always be there to help us. Number 2, when we take our eyes off Jesus, that's when we sink. Number 3, Jesus always helps us when we fall, and that's another miracle of Mark.
This morning, just in closing, what we really wanted to do today was not just everyone gather together and have a good time, which is important. What we really wanted you to know is that God still does miracles. It's quite a miracle that 6 people spoke in 36 minutes. But you need to understand today that if you have sin in your life, like Penny talked about, that only God can deal with that. And the truth is, that's the greatest miracle of all. That he could save me. If you are here and you find yourself in a storm like Annie Lynn talked about, that Jesus is with you in whatever storm you are in this morning. If you feel like this lady that suffered for a long time, or if you feel like you are dead, like Alex talked about, I need you to know this morning that in Scripture they call Jesus the suffering servant. That he knows your suffering. And he wants to raise you from the dead today. Maybe you're here and you've lived your life and and you are just tormented and tormented by sin or whatever is tormenting you, and you felt like this boy. And what you want more than anything is for Jesus to walk up to you today and just speak life to you. Natasha talked about feeding the 5,000, how often we think that what we have is not enough. I'm with her. I'm convinced that many, many people had food there that day. I mean, as long as there was moms with purses and snacks. And if they all put everything together, they probably could have fed everybody. But how often do we go through life concentrating on what we don't have, not what we do have? We need to understand that Jesus calls us in faith to be people who walk on water, like Mariah talked about. These are not just stories from a book. He is the living hope that we sung about this morning. So I would encourage you today, to wherever you are on your walk with God, to maybe go home today and open up the book of Mark and read it. And may the hope of Christ fill your heart today. We're going to pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the opportunity to be here. We thank you for everything that you have done for us. That these are not just miracles from a book, but you are the living hope. And we love you this morning. God, I'm thankful that we could gather today and we could gather and laugh. But I pray that our hearts are encouraged. In your name, amen. Right after church, there's Sundays. Tonight at 4, you can put the Rusty Yard slide on the screen. Really, I wish everyone